In a place like Newport Beach, California, where sunlight streams through the gleaming showroom windows, and everyone thinks they know exactly what the ideal customer looks like. A sharp suit, an expensive watch, a luxury car parked out front. But what happens when an ordinary man walks in, wearing a gray hoodie and worn-out sneakers, not to buy a car, but to test an entire system? In that moment, prejudice flares, and the truth lies in wait, ready to upend everything. She doesn't know. He's the new owner. And that's just the beginning. Malik Thompson didn't take the usual route that morning. While he could have driven the brand-new black Porsche sitting in his garage to visit the showroom he had just acquired, he quietly picked up the keys to an old Ford Escape, dusty from the road. He wasn't out to impress. No need for flash, no desire for sycophantic stares. He was here for the truth. And the only way to strip truth bare was to show up as a nobody. The morning sun spilled over the showroom windows in Newport Beach, casting a subtle glow over every luxury car inside. A red Ferrari sat at the main window, gleaming like a gem, while the Bentley further in was placed perfectly under the display lights, each detail whispering of class, status, and high society dreams. Malik stepped out of the car. Ash-gray hoodie, slightly worn jeans, sneakers dulled by time, a figure no one bothered to notice. And that was exactly the point. No one noticed. He stepped into the cool embrace of the air-conditioned showroom, a breeze that seemed to cut the world in half, where glitz met grit. A cluster of employees huddled near the reception desk, laughter bubbling amid the scent of fresh leather and car polish. As the glass door slid shut behind him, Malik could feel the invisible shift in the room. Eyes flicked toward him, scanning him up and down in a flash, then just as quickly looked away. But no one said hello. No welcome in, no inviting smile. Malik was used to it, far too used to it. But today he wasn't here to react. He was here to observe. A staccato sound of high heels echoed, a rhythm sharp, like punctuation, on the showroom's polished floor. She emerged from the back, tall, soft waves of blonde hair, tailored gray blazer, eyes cold, like steel. In her hand, a clipboard, the preferred weapon of those who believe they're in control. Karen Whitmore, the manager. And it was clear she thought she was vetting an order, not standing before the owner. "Hello," she said, her tone polite but glassy. "How can I help you?" Malik returned her greeting with a calm nod and a faint smile. "I just wanted to look at a few cars." Karen gave him the look, the full scan from worn sneakers to slightly crumpled hoodie. That look, Malik knew well, too well. It didn't need words. It spoke through the subtle eyebrow raise and the slight curl of her lip. The kind of look he'd seen walking into five-star restaurants, luxury hotels, or investment conferences, when he wasn't in a suit or flashing a business card. "We're a specialty showroom," she said, voice laced with a quiet warning, "serving a pre-qualified clientele." "I'm afraid." She trailed off, leaving Malik to fill in the blanks. His smile stayed soft, but his eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "You're assuming I don't qualify?" he asked, voice calm. Not angry, not bitter, just sharp, like a pin through a balloon of prejudice. Karen hesitated for a beat, then quickly rebalanced her tone. "I just want to save you time. The cars here, they all start in the 6-figure range." Malik shrugged, letting the silence do the talking. He strolled past a shimmering silver coupe, his fingers barely grazing the handle, almost as if he was feeling the car's breath beneath the gleaming coat. "Nice car," he said. Karen frowned slightly, then smirked. "Yes, but we ask that customers only touch if they're ready to buy." Malik took a step back and slid his hands into his hoodie pockets. "So, what kind of car do you think someone like me would suit?" Karen was caught off guard by the bluntness, but she didn't hide her growing impatience. Perhaps something more practical. I could show you some of our certified pre-owned models. Malik smiled again, but this time there was a flicker in his eyes. A spark. Not a flame, not yet, but enough to tilt the air in the room. Thanks. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you think is right for someone like me. Karen turned on her heel, the soft thud of her heels against the stone floor a subtle punctuation, as if declaring the conversation over. Malik remained where he was, his gaze drifting around the room like a harmless visitor. But behind those calm eyes, every detail was being logged. He didn't react like a man offended. He reacted like a man studying people, studying the system he was about to dismantle from the ground up. Karen returned shortly after, still gripping the clipboard as if it were a tether to her authority. She held out a neatly printed stack, detailed listings of several used vehicles, their prices ranging from low to insultingly low. A 2016 sedan, an older SUV with a few scratches noted in the description, and a hybrid that had already passed through 3 owners. Here, she said, handing the papers to Malik with a subtle air of condescension, masked as kindness. Are some options more suited to your situation? And she used the word situation like a smokescreen, concealing the phrase she really meant. Social status. Malik took the papers without looking down. Not because he didn't care, because he wanted to keep his eyes right where they mattered. Connection, observation, calibration, sensing. Thank you, he said, his voice unnervingly calm. Karen hesitated at that composure. She seemed to be waiting for a reaction. Discomfort, pushback, or at least some kind of self-defense. But Malik had long outgrown the need for that. He had walked through too many slamming doors to know that sometimes silence speaks the loudest. We just try to be realistic, Karen said, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. Customers often come in with expectations and leave disappointed. I'm trying to spare you that. Malik nodded, smile still light as air. How long have you been doing this job? Almost 10 years, she replied, with a touch of pride. I can tell at a glance who's serious. Experience teaches you that, or teaches you to judge faster. Malik's reply was thrown out casually, but it sliced like a blade. Karen froze for a moment, but she quickly recovered, lips tightening, eyes just a bit more tense. I'm just being honest, she said curtly. And I appreciate that, Malik nodded, tilting his head. So maybe you could help me speak to the owner of the showroom? Karen chuckled softly, the kind of laugh people give when they think the joke is almost over. The owner doesn't spend time here. People like that don't have the luxury of wandering around. Malik crossed his arms, standing steady like a rock in the middle of a churning sea. Then perhaps you could call them. I think they'd be interested to know I'm here. Karen raised an eyebrow, her patience clearly thinning. I don't think that's necessary. If you're serious about buying a car, I can get one of our sales reps to help. Otherwise what? Malik cut in, his voice still level. But now his eyes were beginning to glow like coals quietly catching flame. Karen stepped back slightly, her expression sharpening. Then I'll have to ask you to leave the showroom. Silence fell. The soft hum of the air conditioning was now the only sound, like background music to a curtain being drawn back on a very different kind of show. Malik said nothing. He simply pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, and made a call. Karen watched, her brows furrowing. What are you doing? Calling the owner, Malik replied, raising the phone to his ear. I think they'll want to know what's going on. Her eyes narrowed, shifting from annoyed to unsettled to uncertain. A few nearby staff had started glancing over. No one spoke, but the atmosphere had unmistakably shifted. Malik turned slightly away, spoke briefly, into the phone. Yeah, it's me. I'm at the showroom. Bit of a misunderstanding. Can you let them know I'm here? He ended the call, tucked the phone back in his pocket, and looked at Karen again. Calm, unreadable. They'll be here shortly.
Karen swallowed, her fingers still clutching the clipboard, like it was the only thing anchoring her to a crumbling reality. Who did you just call? She asked, for the first time sounding just slightly off balance. Malik didn't answer. He just looked at her with that same faint smile, beneath which an entire storm was gathering. Wait and see, he said. Then you'll know. No one in the showroom truly understood what was happening. But slowly, eyes began to shift.
From behind desks, from the sales floor, from the reception counter, everyone could feel the pressure building, like heat before a storm breaks. Malik said nothing more. He simply walked, unhurried, toward the black Range Rover positioned near the center of the showroom. Every step he took seemed to crack the foundation of Karen's so-called control zone. The man she had been certain was just another walk-in without the means now felt different. His calm wasn't the calm of someone waiting to be escorted out. It was the calm of someone waiting for the truth to reveal itself. Karen stood frozen, eyes blinking rapidly. She had handled hundreds of clients in her career. Stubborn, slick, arrogant, she'd seen them all. But none like Malik. Unshakably calm. Not angry, not argumentative, but making her feel as if she was the one out of place, in her own territory. The front doors slid open. The sound of leather shoes striking the floor, soft, but purposeful. A man stepped inside, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, a sea blue silk tie, tall and poised, with sharp eyes that scanned the room like radar. With every step he took, the air pressure seemed to change. Karen recognized him instantly. Brian Alvarez, regional director, a man who only visited the most elite showrooms and never unannounced. Mr. Thompson, Brian smiled, striding toward Malik and extending his hand.
So good to see you again. Apologies for keeping you waiting. Malik shook his hand with a smile as light as a breeze. No problem. I was just conducting a little test. The room, filled with people, suddenly fell into a dense silence. Karen stood rooted to the floor. Her fingers clenched the clipboard so tightly, her knuckles turned white. Her ears rang, and a single phrase exploded in her mind. Mr. Thompson. That name, it was the name on the new ownership documents for this very showroom.
Wait, she stammered, turning to Brian, eyes wide. Did you just say he's... Brian didn't let her finish. His voice was polite but firm, enough to kill any lingering doubt in the air. That's right. Malik Thompson, the new owner of this showroom, officially since last month. Karen's face went pale. It was as if every drop of blood had drained away. Her gaze flicked from Brian to Malik, back again. Her mouth opened, then closed, like a door with a broken hinge. No words came out. I didn't know, she finally managed, her voice barely more than a whisper. Malik stepped closer, his voice soft, like someone telling a story from long ago. Didn't know I could be the owner of this place, or didn't know that someone like me has the right to walk in without being judged. Karen inhaled deeply, but no breath seemed deep enough to fill the growing void in her chest. Malik didn't raise his voice, but each of his words dropped like stones into a deep well, echoing questions she had no way of answering. I didn't mean to, she murmured, her voice cracking. Not meaning to doesn't mean it didn't happen, Malik replied. I didn't come here to trap anyone. I just wanted to see what the culture looks like when no one knows who's watching. Brian, standing beside him, tilted his head slightly. I think it's time we gathered everyone. We need to have a quick meeting.
Malik nodded, his eyes scanning the entire showroom, where staff pretended to stay busy, but were clearly tracking his every move. Yeah, he said. I think it's time too. The showroom's meeting room was no stranger to Karen. She had stood at the head of the table countless times, leading sales briefings, strategizing marketing campaigns, confidently presenting on performance and customer experience, but today her seat was no longer one of power.
Today, Karen sat near the far end of the table, her spine seeming to have lost its structure, her eyes avoiding the quiet glances cast by her colleagues. The woman who once prided herself on controlling the room was now weathering a storm, with no umbrella big enough to shield her. Malik was the last to enter. No grand gestures, no knocking, no dramatic entrance. Yet the room fell silent the moment he stepped in. He hadn't changed. No fancy coat, no luxury watch, no entourage.
Still the same ash-gray hoodie. And that made the air even heavier. Because no one could claim they'd been deceived.
He never pretended. They simply misjudged. "Thank you all for being here," Malik began. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and steady, commanding attention without asking for it. "I'm Malik Thompson, and as of last month, I am the new owner of this showroom." A low ripple of murmurs spread through the room, like small underwater currents. A few employees lowered their heads in embarrassment. Others furrowed their brows, visibly uncomfortable. Karen remained still, her hands tightly clasped, fingernails pressing into the back of her hand, as if to keep herself grounded. "I came here today," Malik continued, "not to shock anyone, and not to single anyone out. I simply wanted to see, truly see, how a customer would be treated if they didn't walk in wearing their status." And his gaze swept across the room, pausing briefly when it landed on Karen. "The result, as you've witnessed, wasn't great." Karen inhaled sharply, but Malik wasn't done. "I was judged, not for my words, not for my actions, but for my jeans, my worn shoes, and my skin. I was redirected, offered the cheapest used cars, denied the basic courtesy of touching a product, then eventually asked to leave." He walked slowly toward the head of the table, placing one hand gently on the edge of the glass surface. "I'm not angry. I'm not even upset. But I am disappointed, not just for myself, but for anyone who has ever walked through those doors and experienced the same kind of prejudice I just did." A hush swept in like a wave. We can't build a luxury brand on a foundation that's rotting from bias. Luxury shouldn't be a mask. It should live in how we treat people. A hand rose slowly near the middle of the table. A young male employee, voice slightly shaky, spoke up. "Sir, I think most of us try to be fair, but sometimes we misread. Not out of malice, just reflex." Malik nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I get that. Everyone has biases, but our job, especially in a place like this, is to recognize them and rise above them. Every customer who walks in here carries hope, and what they should never carry out is hurt." He turned toward Karen. She met his eyes now, her once battle-worn face cracked like a wall starting to crumble. "Karen," he said her name, not sharply, not coldly, just invitingly. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry," she began, her voice gravelly, like it had been pulled through stones. "I was wrong. I judged you too quickly, and there's no excuse for that." Malik said nothing. He simply gave her space. "I used to think I knew what customers wanted," she continued, a sad smile flickering at the edge of her lips. "But it turns out I only knew what I thought about them." She gave a soft, bitter laugh. "And that's shameful." Malik gave a slow, respectful nod. "Thank you for your honesty." He turned to face the rest of the staff. "I don't believe in firing people just to teach a lesson. I believe in second chances. But second chances only matter if they come with responsibility. Starting next week, everyone here will go through a retraining program on customer experience, unconscious bias, and equitable service. No exceptions. No one protested. No one dared. And truthfully, no one wanted to. because in that moment, they all understood. This wasn't just Malik's story anymore. It was theirs, being unfolded, revealed, and rewritten. The air in the meeting room felt as if someone had slowed down time itself. Every breath was so audible it echoed like the ticking of a clock. Malik stood at the head of the table, not raising his voice, not pounding the table, but his presence alone was enough to hold every gaze, every thought, and every unspoken regret. "To be honest," he began, "I don't think this showroom needs a sales report right now. What we need is to take a hard look at how we exist." Silence. Stillness. "As a business," Malik continued, "it's easy to talk about customer service or premium experiences, but what happens when all that polished surface conceals a quiet mechanism that makes someone feel less than, simply because they don't look like money?" He paused, glancing out the glass window. The afternoon sun was retreating behind the building, casting a pale golden light over the showroom floor, like dust from a fading spotlight. "Today," he said, "I didn't walk in here just as an investor. I walked in as a test. And what I got in return wasn't service. It was prejudice. Quiet, polite, but still prejudice." Karen sat still as stone, eyes fixed on the floor, hands clutched so tightly they looked carved from marble, as though letting go might shatter her. Another voice spoke up, this time a young woman with neatly tied brown hair and tears brimming in her eyes. I don't think people meant to be cruel," she said, "but I know I've looked away. Once someone walked in, didn't say much, dressed plain, and I pretended to be busy so I wouldn't have to help." She paused, voice cracking. "Today made me realize how wrong that was." Malik didn't interrupt. He let every word fall into the space between them, like broken pieces trying to rearrange themselves into something better. "Thank you," he said softly. "And I hope you all understand, this isn't a personal attack. This is a chance to start again, and to do it better." He pulled a thin stack of papers from his hoodie pocket and placed it on the table. "This is the new cultural training program, not a draft. This is the official schedule." Brian, the regional director, rose from his corner of the room and nodded. "We've already prepared everything. Each team will rotate through training over the next 2 weeks. It includes situational response, unconscious bias awareness, and customer experience simulations." Malik looked around the room. "I don't want employees who are just good at selling cars. I want people who can see the person in front of them, who know how to ask without judging, how to smile without measuring, and more than anything, how to be silent when it's time to listen." He turned, placing a hand on the nearest chair. "I know change isn't easy, but it starts with a choice. And today I choose to reset the standards of this place." Karen slowly stood, like someone waking from a long, disorienting dream. Her voice was still rough, but steadier than before. "I'll attend the training fully," she said. "And, if you'll allow it, I'd like to help rebuild the program itself." Malik nodded, not smiling, but with a look in his eyes that made one feel forgiven, but not excused. "I don't hate you, Karen," he said calmly. "I just hope that next time a man in a hoodie walks in, you see him as a person, not a presumption." She nodded quietly. Malik turned to the rest of the staff. "I don't expect you to be perfect, but I do expect you to be honest. And I'll be working closely with all of you to ensure the changes we make today don't end as empty promises." No one spoke, but in that silence, no longer heavy but charged with commitment, it was clear. Something real had begun to shift. Evening settled slowly across the showroom's glass windows. The light thinned into streaks, like traces of memory still lingering after a day of upheaval. Malik stood at the entrance, where rows of luxury cars remained still under the glow of display lights. But now, they were no longer the focal point of the room. It was the people. The moments of truth that had just unfolded. That's what had truly changed this place. He hadn't come to teach anyone a lesson. He hadn't come to shame. He came to listen, to witness, and to lead. Because he understood. Culture isn't what we paste on a wall. Culture is what flows quietly beneath every word, every look, every choice. And it's in that space, if left unexamined, that prejudice takes root. Real change doesn't come from a new rulebook. It comes from a gaze that pauses before it judges. A greeting instead of suspicion. A sincere invitation rather than a polite dismissal.
Small things, but enough to make someone, like Malik or anyone who's ever been overlooked, feel seen, welcomed, human. Karen stepped out last. She didn't say a word, just gave Malik a small nod. In her eyes was more than remorse. There was a fragile spark of hope. The belief that maybe, when we face our mistakes honestly, they can become the beginning of something better. And Malik knew. Today wasn't an ending.
It was the first page of a new chapter. One where people weren't measured by how they looked, but by the dignity they carried within. What about you? If you walked into a place like that, how would you be received? Would you be welcomed or questioned? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you from? Have you ever experienced something like this? Hit that like button if this story made you pause. And don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw slices of life. Stories that don't just entertain, but matter.